Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of WandaVision, a great episode, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, picking up where the last episode had left off, obviously we're changing over into a new sitcom, but also, Wanda's pregnant, but then, obviously getting the doctor to examine her, and it seems like she's 4 months pregnant, even though she's only a couple hours pregnant, and we see that situation kind of expedites even more because even Vision tries to calculate okay, so what's this mean? That means by Friday you'll end up having a baby, but obviously it just happens at rapid times. I think that's so interesting. I'm curious. I mean, maybe on some. I mean, it makes sense why Wanda would have kids because she, her and Vision probably had those conversations about wanting, a life for themselves and that, starting a family of their own because Wanda doesn't have a family. The closest thing she had was the Avengers, and even that turned into a complicated thing during Civil War, so it's the only person she really had to rely on these past 2 years was, in between, it was like 2 years or so, a year or so between, Civil War and Infinity War. The only person she really had was those moments she could still, with Vision. So it makes sense why, even more so, why this pocket world exists, because it's not only was that all taken from her, but that's what she wanted more so than anything, because they had to steal little moments here and there. So to be able to have that, which I think is kind of interesting when you think about that, she had to steal little moments away with Vision, and technically she's stealing away so many other people's lives in this little concoction, this makeshift world that she's making. So I think that's kind of interesting if you think about it, like that. But it never even crossed my mind to think about the fact is of her having twins. Of what significance that would have, because it's she was a twin herself. So it's having twins is almost it's, I guess in some shape or form you could almost look at it as almost her keeping her brother alive in some shape or form. It's almost a reminder of that to a certain extent. But obviously, I'll kind of break that down a little more as we kind of run through other stuff. I thought it was fascinating how obviously with the pregnancy her powers are kind of running wild, which is interesting considering you can make the argument maybe her powers are constantly running wild, once again it's a constant display of what she's able to do, because it almost obviously seems like stuff pops into existence. But I also think it's fascinating because the stork pops up later on and she tries to make it disappear, but it won't go away, because I guess for her it's supposed to be her brain's manifestation of you're trying to hide away this representation of the stork and a baby, and it's you're trying to hide away from that, hide the fact that you're pregnant, but it's it won't go away because your subconscious is don't run from this. I know you're trying to hide it and everything, but accept it because this is real, this is happening, But then there's other elements that seem hey, maybe she's in a lot more control than you think, but that could also be a sign of she's not in the best mental health right now, considering everything she's going through, the trauma of all that she's lost, and her this whole thing, in a sense, it's almost kind of a mess. It's not, I'm about to say messed up form of therapy, and maybe that's just kind of making her unravel a little bit more. So because because there's a level of parts of all this that you're how much is her actively doing it and wanting it, how much it is subconscious, because it seemed a lot of stuff is subconscious until we get to those points where it's things start popping up that threaten their reality. Because the moment you had Vision be yeah, something's off, because he saw Herb, and Herb was cutting the bushes at first, and then he starts cutting the side, and he's hey, you're missing that a little bit. He's oh, so I am, and he keeps going. I'm okay, that's a little disturbing, and he brings that up to Wanda. I'm yeah, it's something. She's he's basically things have been kind of weird, and starts listing them off. And what does she do? She did what she did last time: rewind, rewrote, and not only rewound it, rewrote the script, because it's no, because it's anytime reality and it doesn't fit the picture perfect of this is how everything's supposed to go down, she attacks and gets rid of it, because it's I don't need you jeopardize. No, it's this is where it is, especially because on some level she knows the truth, she just doesn't want to accept it. So there's a part of her that is she's kind of, her brain is kind of blocked out the trauma, but it is coming back to a certain extent, and she's trying to block it out because it would mean acknowledging certain things. So some part of her is blocking it out just so it doesn't intrude on, subconsciously she's blocking everything out. But then there are the moments where it's not so subconscious, where it's no, I don't like this. It needs to be the way I want. I want everything to be happy and perfect. So she rewrote what Vision was saying, get rid of his concerns and making it more like his concerns about the baby, more about the baby rather than like what's going on here. What I thought was really interesting too was like it seemed like as the episode progressed, they became less and less worried about, because the whole thing was about fitting in, but then now obviously all the wacky stuff that was happening in the house, Vision running to pick up the doctor and everything, which even I picked up on, thought was interesting. It was like, oh, the doctor was supposed to be going to like the Bahamas, but his car couldn't get started. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like a vehicle that would take you out of this town, you're not allowed to leave. It's just like, it's like from that moment I was like, oh, it's like the world's trying to make it so that even though Wanda wasn't aware of him trying to leave. She actually wasn't aware until Vision brought it up. And then after the next scene we see is that his car was broken down. So it's like, okay, she immediately kind of attacked that to be like, no one can leave, especially you, because I need you as my doctor. So, but like I was saying, like they weren't as, well, at first they were about like, oh, we got to hide the pregnancy. We don't want people to know. But it's like Vision ran over there. But I guess like maybe there's some world justification to be like, oh man, he ran really fast. He ran me all the way over here. They didn't question it too much. Geraldine was in the room when all this stuff was spiraling. And she's like, I guess there's an explanation for that. Like, the world is forcing them to just kind of accept things and be like, oh, like she doesn't bring up any questions later on, I guess, because it's like the reality makes it so like, no, you're more focused on the babies and stuff like that. That's what matters most. Like stuff that doesn't make sense in the confines of this world just kind of get wiped away because your worries, it's potentially breaking the fourth wall of this world. And it's like, this world doesn't want you, well, Wanda doesn't want you to realize that what this world is and what's going on. And obviously bring the doctor there, and lo and behold, they have the twins, Billy and Tommy. Well, Tommy and Billy, which I thought was neat because obviously there's the back and forth about the names. Because it's like, well, nothing more American than Tommy, but it's like Billy as in William Shakespeare. And it's like, oh, and Geraldine being there for her, and it's like, hey, once again, I brought this up before, and I think maybe I feel like it's even more pivotal in this regard, that Geraldine might be like the only real friend Wanda's really had. Like I said, other than the Avengers, who were kind of a family, but once again, even that kind of broke down. So, but I think that, like I said, I think that's even more of a reason because like every family she's always had ended up imploding in some shape or form, whether it's losing her brother, whether it's the Avengers themselves, because, this new family she found that she was willing to fight for kind of turned its back on her in many different regards because of everything that went down to Civil War. So, I mean, it kind of came together more, but it's still, the family was fractured. So, and she herself is fractured. So I find it fascinating in that regard. So I think Geraldine is the first real friend she's had in a long time. So I think that's the role that Geraldine was meant to kind of play anyway, was the role of a friend. So being there supporting her, well, it's like, you can do this, you are ready. And is there, I mean, at least with Tommy, obviously Vision being there with, when it came to Billy. But, and then walking the dock out, and it's like, oh, so you ready to go to Bermuda? He's like, yeah, small towns is really hard to escape. And you're like, oh, there we go with that sinister stuff again. And then you have like Agnes and her talking, they're whispering, and I'm like, what's that about? I was like, and they're like, oh, hey neighbor, and they're just whispering to each other, like, okay, what's going on here? It's like, well, it's about Geraldine. She's in there with Wanda, right? It's like, yeah, what about her? It's like, she's a good person. It's like, yeah, but she doesn't have any family. She's not married. I'm like, why is that a big deal? And it's like, she doesn't even have a home. She just came to, and I'm like, oh, so like the world is recognizing like something's up with Geraldine. Yeah, because that's what's so interesting about Geraldine's situation. Because obviously I brought it up last episode that, obviously it's Monica, but like it seemed like she got fit into the role of this world. Because part of me was starting to wonder, was she playing along with this, or did she actually get sucked up into the narrative that Wanda created? So it's like the moment she stepped into this world, hey, I'm, maybe for a little bit she wasn't caught up in it. That's what I'm so curious, like, or was she acting the entire time? Because it seems like something later on triggers Geraldine, where it's like, it's not until Wanda kind of broke, it's like, oh yeah, she's like, I'm a twin, I had a brother, and and then Geraldine was hearing her humming that hymn, and it was like, yeah, he died because of Ultron. And then Wanda was like, what did you just say? And it's like, oh, snap. And then we saw that like darker side of her, and whether it was Monica fully back or whether it was just her being like, what? No, you know what I was, Wanda, if you want, I can, like, I don't, it's hard to say with Geraldine, or rather Monica, like whether that was really her finally at the end, finally broken the spell. Like, what about that hymn broke the spell. I guess it was just all that information, because up till now, Wanda hadn't really talked about anything. Well, for one, that was something painful she talked about, because it's all been bliss. And yeah, there's, cramps and pain from, being pregnant, but it's like some of the sad stuff out. So because in her, it's like, as the example people have been used, I was kind of, Pleasantville, it's like, for her, it's like, oh, it's all sunshines and rainbows. But the moment she started being like, oh yeah, like here's some tragic stuff, like my brother died, that's when it clicked. And I think basically the state of Wanda's mind is so fragile that the seams are slowly, we're seeing it break bit by bit. And I think it was broken enough, or at least it's falling apart at the seams enough for Monica to be like, wait, your brother died from Ultron. Like, that's what happened. And it's like, so, and the only reason why Monica would know that is because she got probably filled in on everything to know about Wanda ahead of time. So now it's a situation, like I said, of whether at the end was that her trying to play the role of Geraldine, or was the world warping to make her kind of go back into that? But for Wanda, it's like, no, like Wanda attacked her like she was. Like she's like a virus within the body. It's like, no, you need to get out. You're making this place sick. Like you're bringing reality in here. Get out, get out, get out. Even later on when Vision's like, where'd she go? It's like, oh, she left. She had an emergency or something like that. But going back to it, this line from Herb and Agnes, and it's like, yeah, she came here because, and Agnes like, no. So it's like, some parts of this world, they're cognitive enough, because there's a glitch in the Matrix where it's not a perfect simulation anymore, where everyone, like, they're able to kind of get some frame of a free will out, because she doesn't have a complete and full. I think the moment certain things start chipping away at that reality, like, it makes it so the cracks start happening in other aspects. Like, I mean, keeping up this whole thing is a 24-hour job. And I think once she starts cracking a little bit, it makes everything else start cracking. But she's trying to basically, like, duct tape, it's like, but that's not going to hold forever. Like, she's trying to tape up the cracks in the seams little by little. But it's that they're aware enough to be like, no, don't question it. Because if you question it, it's going to be an issue for you and us, because Agnes is like, be quiet. Because what also set Wanda off was like, she noticed the necklace that Monica had. It was a sword emblem. I didn't even piece this together because I didn't notice it last episode until people talked about it. It's like the beekeeper had a sword emblem. So you're like, okay, so it's sword, which the last time we saw sword, because once again, we don't know the time frame in between this and Endgame. Like, last time we saw sword was in Far From Home, and that was like, it was still, at least being set up in space. So not unless this is a different version of it, like maybe this is their more Earth-based operations while still maintaining their universal cosmic operations. I mean, to be fair, Wanda altering reality, I mean, because that's something interesting, though, like, for this to be big enough. Yeah, I mean, it's a big enough incident, but I guess it's because it's Wanda who can warp and shape reality. The same person that could easily go toe to toe with Thanos if he didn't use like have his ships firing. Let's not forget, she was close to killing Thanos herself. So it showed you how powerful she is, and if she's able to kind of warp a reality, creating this little scenario, the simulation with an entire town, and keeping it up like that can be no easy job. So, I mean, if this is sword too, it does make sense why Monica would be, because obviously, Fury's connection to Carol, plus obviously he was there with Monica when they met as kids, so maybe he came back after everything with Endgame, is like, all right, let's start sword. Monica maybe sought him out, or we'll probably have to wait to find out, like, because there's a long history that we're still unaware of, like, what happened in that time frame from, like, the events of Captain Marvel in the 90s to everything present day with Endgame, what happened in that time frame. Maybe this has something to do with that, was Monica someone that was caught in a snap or not, regardless, what makes it so fascinating too is just that sinister look on Wanda's face when she was like, yeah, she had to go and she's focusing on the babies. It's like, no, this is my perfect place. This is my happy place. Everything's perfect. I can't have anything or anyone jeopardizing it. Yeah, nothing's going to change this. No one's going to stop this. This is it. This is everything. Everything's perfect. I have everything I want. I have vision. I have 2 beautiful baby boys. So it's just, but that look, and that's what I'm saying. Like, whether it's like, there's a subconscious angle to it, but there's also the angle of her that like recognizes what's going on. And it's like, you know what? I know I'm not going to have this taken away from me again. I was happy once and I had it taken from me. I won't let anyone take my happiness ever again, you know? So there is because that was like I brought up before where I felt like she was becoming more conscious, but at the same time, that's the thing of like what's conscious and what's subconscious, because now like I feel like you can make it seem like a lot of her actions could be either or, but I'm kind of leaning more towards thinking some of this is very conscious, that she's aware of what she's doing and she's doing it on purpose. But we finally get our first look fully, well, at least a decent look on the outside. Obviously we saw bits and pieces of it in the trailer, but Monica getting flown out, everybody like getting that outside look of like realizing like, oh, just like how much preparation, like how, like you see the tents and the vehicles are just like the manpower set up around this situation that is drawing that much attention, you know, from, you know, like I said, we don't know how this whole sword situation operates, you know, like I said, whether this is just purely the ground team collaborating with like, I mean, not unless Monica's the only person from sword, but then there was that other person too. So then there's, which begs the question, who was the beekeeper? Could that have been someone manifesting as like, someone trying to sneak into her reality? Like, how long would it take someone sneaking into her reality before they become a part of it? So does that mean there is someone else there? To be fair, she rewound it, so that person might have gotten booted out too, or that might have just been a manifestation representing. The fact is, I would assume that was actually someone sneaking in, not just a manifestation of like representing that, you know, Geraldine or rather Monica was there. We'll have to see. Still, so many questions. I'm very excited to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.